bounce around a little bit in order to get as much done as we can. We've spoken in the past, over the last few weeks, this whole idea of Shevet Levi, and Shevet Levi working inside of the tabernacle and the temple, right? And they worked from the ages of 30 to 50. That was what we understood up until now. If you take a look down at the bottom on verse number 23, 776, Vayidav Hashem al Moshe lemor, Zoyt Hashel alavim miben chamesh ve'esim shana v'malo yavo litzpo tzava ba'avodas oil moed. That they have to go from what? From the age of 25, not from the age of 30. U'bein chamishim shana yashuv mitzava avoda v'lo yavoid oid. If anybody here is a Levi, the work life of a Levi is pretty short. We'll see in a minute. Even though they start at the age of 25, they really become obligated when they're 30. So there's really 20 years worth of working over here. At the age of 50, they retire.
What's the meaning of 25?
We'll get there in a minute. We'll get there. Right? The Sheri says, "Ha'echav ba'oil moed lishmo mishmeres va'avoda lo ya'avoid, kocha ta'asel alavim b'mishmorisam." So what are we going to do with this difference between the ages of 30 and the ages of 25? So Chazal already explained that really the Leviim begin working, their obligation begins at the age of 30. However, working in the temple was not a simple thing to do, and therefore they had to apprentice themselves out for 5 years. They would come at the age of 25 already, and they would start working in order to be able to try and get themselves ready to be able to perform whatever they need to do when they become obligated from the age of 30 onwards. So first of all, there's a couple of important things over here. There is a concept of being mechanech your children. You have to educate your children before they become bar and bat mitzvah, right? When you become bar and bat mitzvah, when you're 12 and 13, depending on whether you're a boy or a girl, so you become obligated in the mitzvahs. However, there is a mitzvah before that for parents to educate their children so that when they do become obligated in the mitzvahs, they should immediately be able to just walk into doing them without, they'll be familiar with them already. They won't have to worry about what they're supposed to be doing. Over here, it's exactly the same kind of a thing. However, God is saying it takes 5 years. Right? A person is going to work for 5 years, then that's what's going to be. There's a fascinating Rashi over here. Certainly needs a little bit of an explanation. Down at the bottom, the last Rashi on the column on 776, it says, Mi bein chamesh ve'esim, over mokum acher oime mi bein shloishim shana, and somewhere else it says 30 years. HaKetzat, mi bein esim v'chamesh, ba lilmod hilchus avoida, v'lo imed chamesh shanim, ubein shloishim oived. So he starts learning when he's 25, and then when he's 30, he begins to work. And then it says Rashi like this. Rashi is simply quoting the Gemara in Chulin. Rashi says, Mikan letalmid shelo ras simin yofer b'mishnasoi b'chamei shanim sheshuv eino roya. That somebody who learns for 5 years and doesn't see any success in his learning, so that person, he's not obviously not going to become the next Einstein. That's what Rashi seems to be implying over here. That's what Rashi, the sages, right, seems to be implying over here. Somebody learns for 5 years and they don't have any success in their learning, then at that point, they're not going to see, right, what does it say? Eino roye. He's not going to do so well. Shalor ros simin yofe. He didn't do so well in his learning over here. What are we supposed to understand? This goes completely against everything that we've ever learned about learning Torah, no?
What kind of Levi does it become? How can he work in the
What kind of a Levi does he become? But Rashi, interestingly enough, is branching off away from the Levium, and he's telling us in general, right? Again, that the Gemara is talking in general, that somebody who studies Torah for 5 years and doesn't see any success in what he's doing, so he's not going to see success. So the question over here is, what exactly is being spoken about? Again, it goes...
It's obvious.
What's obvious?
What's obvious? 5 years, and he sees he doesn't.
Why give him 5 years? Maybe 2 years is enough. If you see somebody.
Good question, right? What's it? Why Dafka 5 years? Why not? Let's
a year, 2 years.
Yeah.
Something.
I mean, the emissaries, of course, that kind of a question can be asked on anything, right? Which means that if it would have said 2 years, then you would have said, why 2 years? If it would have said 7 years, you would have said, why 7 years? Which means that there's got to be a number of some kind which is going to be the cutoff point. The question over here is, though, I hope that this is something that everyone is familiar with. No, we don't give up when it comes to learning Torah. We don't give up and say, you know what, you didn't do so great. The last few years didn't do so great, so forget it. You're never going to get anywhere. Where do we ever hear anything like that? So what's the pshat over here? The pshat over here is not that if somebody wasn't blessed with a tremendous IQ, so studying is very hard for them, and that means that they should stop studying. That's not what it means, but rather it means that if you were studying in order to take a public position, right? If you were studying in order to be able to give over to others, and after 5 years you see that you're really not doing so great, it's not really working the way that you thought it was going to work, at that point it's pretty safe to assume that you're not going to do so great. My father had a cousin who was when I was growing up, he was Mr. Physics. In England, he wrote all the physics textbooks for high school and for university. A fellow called Michael Nelkin, the most brilliant physicist. He was my father's cousin. And he used to give me private physics lessons. So you would imagine, right, that if you're getting private physics lessons from Michael Nelkin, that I should be a real physics whiz, right? I mean, that goes without saying, no? Well, the last physics exam I ever did, I must have been about 14, I reckon, and I got 12%. I think the teacher was being pretty generous, actually. He probably gave me extra marks for spelling my name right. But so I remember when I went to tell him how I did, and I sat over there. He was a very, very gentle man, very sweet man. And he looked at me with his great big eyes, and he says to me, look, he says, you know, if you were thinking of a career in physics, he says, maybe you should think about something else. I think it hurt him more than it hurt me. Right? I never really had any ideas of going into physics, but that's really what's going on over here. If you had an idea of moving out, branching out, and becoming an important rabbi, someone who's going to be able to give halachic rulings to all kinds of people and to have some kind of an incredible impact on the Jewish world, well, if after 5 years of studying you see that maybe it's not going so well, so the chances are that it's not going to go so well. Maybe that's not the field that you're supposed to be moving into. However, I once heard from one of my Rebbes something very beautiful. There's a concept that when you learn Torah, you're supposed to learn Torah for learning it for its own sake. What's called l'shem shamayim, learning it lishma. Over here, it transpires, I think the Gemara is talking about somebody who's not learning Torah lishma. He's learning it in order to be able to give over to others, maybe in order to build up his reputation, in order to be able to have some kind of a place inside of the Jewish world. That kind of a person, if he doesn't succeed within the first 5 years of his studies, if he doesn't succeed, then he's probably not going to succeed. I think that's what the Gemara is talking about. But my Rabbi said like this, somebody who learns l'shem shamayim, when you learn Torah, Torah has got less to do with a function of your IQ and more to do with a function of your desire to learn. And if you're learning for the right reason, you can overcome your IQ, you can overcome learning disabilities as well, because the desire to want to know is just so great that's what happens. There was a very famous story in New York, in inner city New York, a little while ago, a few years ago, about a novice teacher who was given the most problematic class in the whole of the school, and she turned them around. No one had been able to hold on to this class for more than a few months. And they'd given them all the best teachers, and they didn't get anywhere. And this lady teacher, who had really only just qualified a little while before, was given this class out of desperation, and within 6 months she turned them around. And they were getting great grades, and they were doing really well. And at the end of the school year, the principal calls her in, and he sits her down and he says to her, what is your secret? And she says, what are you talking about? He says, what are your secret? He said, everybody over here has failed with this class except for you. How come you succeeded? And she said, look, all I did was work according to their IQs, that's all. They had very high IQs, and that's how I taught them. So he says, what are you talking about? Where would you know that from? She says, I don't know. At the beginning, when I took over the class, you gave me a list of all their names with their IQ numbers next to them as well. It had transpired that they were the locker numbers, that's all. And they were in the hundreds. And this lady, what did she do? Without any second thought, she just assumed that she was dealing with a bunch of bright kids, so she taught them like a bunch of bright kids. And all of a sudden, they started reacting to the way that they were being taught. If you want to learn something, Very often it's possible to overcome. Not always. I'm not. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that that somebody who has no hand coordination, for example, is not going to become a professional sportsman, right? They're not going to become a professional musician. It's not going to happen. But within certain limits, a person with limited intellectual abilities, I don't think our intellectual abilities are limited at all. I think our intellectual abilities are squashed, especially in the kind of educational frameworks that we grow up in. Squashed. I think they're squashed by intellectual, the intellectual requirements, government curriculums. Again, I'm not suggesting that that's not the way to do it. I'm not casting any kind of a judgment over here about the way that people are being educated today. I'm just saying that I'll give you a basic example. I'm a little bit older than most people over here in this room. That when I was in school, there was no such thing as ADD and ADHD. It didn't exist. No one had worked that one out. I reckon half my class probably had ADHD. No one took anything. You just sat in class and you just coped. That's all. Now again, don't misunderstand me, I'm not suggesting that there's something wrong with being diagnosed as having some kind of a learning disability and being able to be given medication that will make your life easier in school. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that we react as students, we react to what there is. And the young mind is very, very malleable, it's very flexible, and capable of doing all kinds of things, which as we get older, becomes less capable of doing. Yeah.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to say anything, but I agree with you by the fact that the way that the school systems and the way that our systems in general challenge the students today is going to reflect on how their IQ is and how they, what their level of intelligence and how much their understanding is. And I remember growing up here, because I grew up in Israel, the smallest example is just, we would ask them, and we would come to class, and we'd know we have a test, and we would ask if we have regular questions, open questions, or if we had American-style questions, which were multiple choice.
Right.
That's what they're called here, American-style questions. So it's just stuff that makes it easier and easier and easier for you, and then it just doesn't make you challenge your brain. If you grow up like that, then you're limited on your understanding, but you can still challenge it at one point and become more
listen,
intelligent.
when I was in school, we very, very rarely had multiple choice exams.
Never had. We'd hope for it. We would call it multiple.
Of course.
It was American style questions.
I think the only time that I ever answered all the questions in the exams was when we had multiple choice. Otherwise, I used to get stuck with all kinds of things over there. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's right. I really don't know what's right. But I'm just saying that the human mind is an incredibly adaptable thing, and the more that it's squashed into a particular framework, the less ability there is to think outside of that. Over here, I really think this what these verses are saying over here is that inside of our religious lives, there is no bell curve. Right? Inside of our religious lives, there really is no concept of multiple choice. There really isn't. Here, the rabbis are extrapolating from the Levies. They're extrapolating a lesson for all of us at all times. I think
Rashi makes it for everybody.
Yeah, for sure, right? Which means that what we're learning over here is that how does that phrase go? No, if there's no pain, there's no gain. That's really what it comes down to. Which means we have to push ourselves to our limits. The emphasis is that we all know that. We know that if anyone who's involved in any kind of sports knows that. Anybody who's involved in any kind, you want to become successful at whatever you do, you've got to push yourself to your limits. You know that. Doesn't matter whether you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, or you want to be a professional photographer. It doesn't matter, right? But you've got to keep pushing, always keep pushing outwards in order to see how far you can get, how innovative you can be. That's how people become successful. And in our religious lives, that's true as well. That within our individual capabilities, we've got to push to become as successful as we can, maybe without looking at the end result. That's what Rashi's trying to give over here. Somebody who's learning Torah with an eye to becoming somebody, well, if after 5 years you haven't done it, then there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to do it. That does not preclude the possibility of somebody then deciding, you know what, I'm going to learn Torah just for the sake of learning Torah without thinking about my future and without wanting to become somebody famous. and he might end up becoming famous. Right? Why? Because now he's learning something, l'shem shamayim. He's doing it for the right reasons, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will allow him, access to understand things in a way that he wasn't able to understand up until then. But, I'll give you an example, a very simple example. It's got nothing to do with Torah, it's to do with everything, though. Very often, have you ever tried teaching children something? When you are stressed and they are stressed, there's no way that you're going to get this message across. You're trying to teach a little kid that 4 + 4 = 8, right? And for you, it's so incredibly obvious, and this little kid just doesn't chap it, and you're getting frustrated, and the kid's getting frustrated too. The more frustrated the kid becomes, the less chance there is that they're ever going to learn that 4 + 4 = 8. When you teach it to them in a state of here, hopefully it doesn't matter, you learn it, you don't learn it, it doesn't learn it, but we're going to do this in a calm fashion, and we're going to try to get it across in the easiest possible way. That's the way to do it. If anybody's ever had to teach their kid, or if you've ever been taught your bar mitzvah parsha, right, to learn for your bar mitzvah, to read from the Torah for your bar mitzvah, you'll know as well as I do that when you go through it with your father, that's a lot more stressful than when you go through it with your bar mitzvah teacher. Right? Because your father is like, you got to get every word right. If you don't get every word right, it's a reflection on me, and that's no good. And what's going to be, and people are going to laugh, and they're going to say you're useless, and they're going to realize you get your uselessness from me, right? Whereas the bar mitzvah teacher is saying, okay, here, this is what you got to do. Hopefully you're going to get it right. It's going to be okay. That's the way it works, right? I think that's what Rashi's teaching us over here as well, but I think there's something else as well. There's one more detail over here, which I think is something of tremendous importance. In order to know something, we have to learn from others. That's the most basic lesson of all, no?
The internship.
Internship, right? Apprentice yourself off to somebody, but I don't think this is something which is applicable just to the Levian. I think we're being given a little message over here. You wanna know something, you want to become something, then you have to apprentice yourself out to somebody to learn how to do that.
The fact that it's said in here, it's amazing that practice was practiced. Then it means that there were trades and there were trades and agriculturists and priests and not only Hebrews from wherever, I don't know, idol worshippers. Everybody was building a house or creating a psiphas, what's it called, a mosaic somewhere, all over the Middle East in those days. So everybody needed to know how to do something well.
Yeah.
So the fact that there was this knowledge, this awareness that you need to get a young kid to come and sit by an expert for a number of years to learn something, it's amazing.
Right. So
it goes back all that way.
What is true in the world of mosaics is just as true in the world of Judaism as well, in the world of religion, the world of spirituality. Where are you supposed to be spiritual if nobody ever taught you how to do that? You know that the sages teach the word emunah, which means faith, right? To belief in God, comes from the word uman. An uman means a craftsman, right? A trade. But not just a trade. You're an expert at what you do, right? How do you become an expert at what you do? You can't just wake up one morning and decide that you're going to be...
From the word litamen. Litamen is
litamen, to train, right? Which means that you can't just wake up one day and say, that's it, I'm going to buy a hammer and a couple of nails and I'm going to become a master craftsman. It doesn't work like that. You got to go. You got to struggle over this, right? You got to go and you got to apprentice yourself out to the best in the business, right? And learn how to work with different woods and how things go together and what needs to be done in different techniques. And then at some point, if you're lucky, then you can become an uman. You can become a craftsman.
But
right?
question, Rabbi, so it makes sense to the basic things like build a house, trees, whatever. Like you can date it back, so. But what about new careers and new, like where does it start? Where does if you have to learn it from someone and they have to learn it from someone?
Sure, you're 100% right. Which means like this: that at some point, first of all, I think there are very few things in the world which are new, brand new, right? But you know what? Even when you've got something which is truly brand new, that means that you've got to have somebody who is thinking completely outside of the box, right? I mean, where do things get created from? You've got inventors. Where do people invent from? They invent because why don't we invent? Because we're happy with what there is. It's fine, right? Whatever there is just great. Whereas an inventor is somebody who's looking and saying, no, hold on a second, we could do this in a different way. If Da Vinci, who was centuries ahead of his time, invented a helicopter. I mean, the only problem was that he lived in an era where there were no engines and there was no way of getting this thing up into the wall, into the sky, right? But could you imagine somebody who lives in an era where there's no concept of motors, there's no concept of electronic gadgetry, nothing, and he's busy inventing something called a helicopter? You got to have a lot of vision for that. A lot of vision.
I don't know if I'm on topic or not, but this normal bell curve, they measure changes from that sweet spot in a unit of measure called deviation. It really is. It's called deviation. How you deviate from the sweet spot.
Of course, and deviation is something which is considered to be absolutely terrible, right? A deviant is somebody who, he's the kind of person that your mummy warned you about when you were a kid. But deviation, if you take a look at all these incredible inventors and all these incredible creators in the world, and you'll see that most of these people most of the people were lousy students, right? Because their minds did not work according to the way that, that they were being taught. It's as simple as that. Einstein was a lousy. His report cards were appalling. That's what I always used to think I was like Einstein.
Yeah, I was just thinking in my head.
We shared.
I feel a bit better about my report cards.
we shared that together for sure, right?
Maybe one day.
There's a Calvin and Hobbes, the cartoon. So Calvin's telling somebody once, he says, you know what, Einstein had appalling report cards, and mine are even worse than his was, right? So I'm doing great, that's for sure. Which means that, people think out of the box. So once you become famous and you become rich because you've invented something which is different from everybody else, so all of a sudden everybody adulates you. Go back and speak to that person's teachers and you'll see they were probably pulling their hair out in frustration, right? I think what we're learning over here is that a person has to learn from others. How you learn from others has to be according to who you are, right? One of the beauties of the way that we learn Judaism is that you can have all different kinds of role models and mentors. So from this person you can be inspired by the way they understand Torah, right? This person you can be inspired by the way they pray. This one over here you can be inspired about the way that they do chesed. This one can inspire you according to this. This one according to that. And you can learn and you can watch and you can see from all different kinds of people. It's very beautiful. But it's very fundamental. It really is.
How did the Levim learn something that was all brand new?
Brand new, which means that they were lucky though, because they had Moshe to teach them, which means they've got the ultimate tutor, able to give over to them whatever they need to know in the way that they're going to understand it.
He taught his brother, and his brother was the Kohen.
His brother was a Kohen, right? Moshe himself was a Levi. Which means that he's got the ultimate qualification to be able to teach others how to do what they need to do.
If they're brothers, how can they be from different tribes?
They're not from different tribes. The Kohen comes from Levi. There is no tribe of Kohen per se. Right? From the original tribe, there was tribe of Levi.
Like a job.
Kohen, they were elevated into a special position inside the tribe of Levi.
So were they chosen?
Yeah, Aaron and his sons were chosen by God.
No, I'm saying the Cohens. The Cohens
were
chosen to be Cohens?
Yeah.
You said Moses was a Cohen, not Aaron.
No, Moses was a Levi.
Moses was a Levi.
Aaron was chosen by God him and his sons to become the Kohanim.
And then descendants are a Kohen.
Right, and then you have within the tribe of Levi, you've now got you've got a little group who are now Kohanim. Right?
Now, why do they have that special privilege? Not the Kohanim, but the Levi.
The Levi. Why do the Levites have that special privilege? It's a very important question. It really is. Anyone here a Levi?
Well,
I keep asking every week, every day. I keep asking everyone who is a Levi in the hope that somebody will say yes. If somebody could just say yes at some point, even if you're not, thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, so what happened in the Egel Azov, in the golden calf, when Moses came down from Har Sinai and he saw what was going on, so he shouted out, Mila Hashem Elai, anybody who's for God should come to me. And the whole of the tribe of Levi came. There's something special about the tribe of Levi, there really is. There's something where the tribe of Levi are prepared to sacrifice everything in order to be able to fulfill the will of God. And at that point, God elevated the tribe of Levi into that special position. He took away, originally, the Levites, in inverted commas, were really the firstborn in each family. They were the spiritual mentors. They were the spiritual leaders of each family. However, what did God do? He took away that firstborn status from the firstborn kids, and he handed it over to Shevet Levi instead, and that's why they became the spiritual. They became the spiritual mentors of the Jewish people. Here, let's go on. Let's go to chapter 9. Right here, we're going to see something really weird over here, something very strange. So now what's happened? They've left the land of Egypt, and they're now in the second year in the desert. And what happens in the second year in the desert? What's going to come rolling around? Pesach. Right? What can you do? Got to clean for Pesach. The good news is that the manna didn't have any chametz in it. So I don't think they had to do much cleaning. However, it says like this, so they offered up the Pesach in the right time, which is when, on the 14th of Nisan, in the evening, just before it becomes the 15th of Nisan, and you've got to do it the way that they've been instructed to do it already the year before.
Cities or unwalled cities?
Everywhere, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Walled, unwalled. וידבר מוישה ובני ישראל לעשות הפסח. ויעשו את הפסח בראשון ב14 יום לחודש בין 40 במדבר סיני, ככל אשר ציווה השם את מוישה כן עשו בני ישראל. Very good, finished, right? So what have we got? That's the end of Pesach. Everything is just great. No, it's not. Let's have a look and see. We'll see something fascinating over here. Verse number 6. ויהי אנשים אשר היו טמאים לנפש אדם, ולא יכלו לעשות הפסח ביום ההוא. Now, in order to bring the Paschal lamb, bless you, in order to bring the Korban Pesach, bless you, you had to be spiritually pure. Says the Torah over here that there were some people who were spiritually impure. Right? They became impure because they were in contact with a dead body. The question over here is which dead body exactly. So according to some opinions, they were the ones that carried the coffins of the 12 tribes that were brought out. Bless you again. They were brought out, the 12 tribes that were brought out, right? The 12 sons that were brought out when we left Egypt. So anyone who comes in contact with a dead body is spiritually impure. If he's spiritually impure, he can't bring a Korban Pesach.
Even if you touch a coffin?
With the body inside, yeah.
The body inside?
Yeah.
So if I went to my grandpa's graveyard to...
Yeah, so you'll be spiritually, you're considered to be spiritually impure.
For how long?
The emphasis is right now until the Mashiach comes, we're all spiritually impure. What's pshat? So far everything is clear, right? These people are spiritually impure, so they can't bring the Korban Pesach. So they come to Moshe and Aaron. And they say, and they come to Moshe and Aaron and they say, we're impure. And it's not fair. We can't bring a Korban Pesach. And Moshe says to them, let's wait and see. Hold on, before you turn the page. I want you to understand just how strange this dialogue is. Here, let's say, for example, somebody is instructed by his doctor that it's forbidden for him to eat, it's forbidden for him to fast on Yom Kippur. He has to eat. So what does he do? He eats. He'll go to the rabbi. The rabbi will say, look, the doctor says you've got to eat because if you don't eat, it's going to be a danger to your life. Therefore, you've got to eat. And he'll explain to him how to eat on Yom Kippur, right? Somebody gets sick and they have to be taken on Shabbat in an ambulance to the hospital. He broke Shabbat, right? Transgressed Shabbat. we don't see anywhere the idea of this person being able to come back to the rabbi and say, listen, Rabbi, on Shabbos they took me to the hospital, so I'm going to keep Shabbos on Wednesday now just to make up for what I missed. Right? We don't see anywhere where it says the person comes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I had to eat on Yom Kippur, so I'm going to keep Yom Kippur the next day because the doctor says it's okay for me to fast now. You hear what's going on? If you were told by the doctor that you're not allowed to fast, then by not fasting on Yom Kippur, you're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing when they're fasting. When a person's life is in danger and he has to go to the hospital on Shabbat, he's not transgressing Shabbat. He's fulfilling the dictates of the Torah by going to the hospital on Shabbat. You hear the thing? You hear what's going on over here? How on earth can these people are carrying the dead bodies of the 12 tribes, right? The 12 brothers. Are they doing something they shouldn't do? No, quite the opposite. They're doing a big mitzvah over here, no? Big chesed shel emes, right? It's a big mitzvah what they're doing over there. So how can they come... hold on a second, just one last bit, right? They're doing a big mitzvah over here, but the problem is that the repercussion of the mitzvah they're doing now is stopping them from doing a different mitzvah, right? So what should their reaction really be? Tough. What should Moshe have told them? They came to Moshe and they said, Moshe, it's not fair. We're schlepping these bodies around through the desert, and because we've got these bodies, we can't offer up the Korban Pesach. We can't offer our Korban Pesach. What should Moshe have said to them? Tough. You're doing a mitzvah. Be happy with what you're doing. So you can't do this mitzvah, and you do a different mitzvah instead. Hold on a second. What does Moshe say? Moshe, strangely enough, in verse number 8, he says, Vayomer aleh Moshe, Imdu ve'eshma ma yitzah ve'Hashem lachem. Let's see what God says. Is there some merit to what they're saying, or there isn't any merit to what they're saying? Hold on, it's going to get even stranger. Let's go across the page. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe lemor. So God then says to Moshe like this: Dabel b'nei Yisrael lemor, ish ki yeh tameh lenefesh, oy v'derech lechoyko lachem, oy ledoroseichem, v'asa pesach la'Hashem. Here's what we're going to introduce, a brand new halacha over here. What's his halacha? That if somebody's not able to bring his Korban Pesach for reasons beyond his control, which means either he's spiritually impure, or he's far away and on the way it was too difficult for him to get to Yerushalayim on time, so what's he going to do on the 14th of Iyar, the next month? He can bring a Korban Pesach. Al matzah, so morim yachlu, and he should eat it with matzah and maror.
Even though it's not Pesach.
Even though it's not Pesach.
But Rabbi, right now, but then the Gemara talks about how like later on in time there was the cities that were in the war with Paras, and so the guys, the people that were the four that they couldn't come and pass around the 14th of the month could do it the next day, not the next month. You
So
know
it depends how far away you are. Right, but if there's a situation where, let's say, talk about something which is definitely a problem. Somebody who becomes spiritually impure from coming in contact with a dead body is impure for 8 days. He's got impurity for 7 days, and on the 8th day he becomes pure, which means it's impossible for him to be able to bring that Korban Pesach within Pesach. Can't be done, right? So now HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, that's okay. So come next month instead. לא ישוב ממנה הבוקר ובעצם לא ישברו בו כל חוקת הפסח יעשו איסוי והאיש אשר הוא טהור בדרך לא היה וחזר לעשות הפסח מחוצה מנפש ההיא מהמאה כי קורבן השם לא יקריב במועדו חטא יישא האיש ההוא. And then the Torah goes on to add a little addendum over here, just a little caveat. If there's no valid reason why you could not turn up on Pesach and you didn't, thinking, you know what, I'll come next month, it's a little bit more convenient for me, that's not going to count. You've just committed a big sin. Right? Okay, hold on, we'll get to verse number 14 at the end of all of this. So far, so good. So we don't understand what's going on. Patrick, you want to say something?
No, I was just kind of curious. Because of the visual, like anyone impure, unable to make the offering, were they subject to like scrutiny, gossip? Like were they in their absence, when everyone
Well,
else, I mean, would that have been an issue?
I don't know. First of all, there were millions of people in Jerusalem. Whether your being there or not was noted by a lot of people, presumably not. It could be that your immediate circle, they'd want to know why you weren't there. So again, we're talking about things over here that are not problematic, which means you set off on time and you end up not being able to get to Jerusalem on time, or you became spiritually impure. We're not talking about things which are, hopefully not going to spark off some kind of a Lashon Hara fest, right? Because you're not there, and keeping in mind, of course, that if somebody does speak Lashon Hara, he's going to get zapped with tzaras. Now, I'm going to just add one more piece of detail over here, which means if this was a mitzvah like all the other mitzvahs, then how should it have been given?
The rest of the mitzvahs are given.
Right, which means that God should give it over to Moshe, and Moshe should tell it over to Aaron, and then he should tell it over to Aaron's children, and then he'll tell it over to the Zkanim, to the elders, and then he'll tell it over to the Jewish people, right? It's not very complicated over here, it really isn't. And yet what happens? Moshe has to go to God and find out what's going on, and then God announces that which means like this, according to the Mefarshim, the most incredible idea. There was originally it's called Pesach Sheni. There's even a minig, there's a custom among some people that on the 14th of Iyar, you eat matzah. Just as that, you don't, Baruch Hashem, you don't have to clean out your house, and you don't have to get rid of your chometz, and you can eat your matzah together with your chometz. It's not a problem. Huh? You don't have to go to a hotel, right? The Indian is what? The Indian is a custom to eat matzah on Pesach Sheni. Explain the Mefarshim like this, most incredible thing. There was originally no Pesach Sheni.
Like the second part of the holiday at the end?
No, I'm talking about in Iyar, the next month. This piece over here.
Okay.
There was originally no Pesach Sheni that God put into the calendar. Which is why God never taught it over to Moshe, which is why Moshe never knew what the halacha was, and he never taught it over to the Jewish people. So explain the Mefarshim, where does Pesach Sheni come from? It comes only from one place, which was the intense desire of these people to have some kind of a connection to Korban Pesach. They wanted to belong. They knew perfectly well that they were absolved from any kind of obligation to bring their Korban Pesach. They knew that. That's not what they're not coming to talk. That's not what they're talking about. They're not coming to say that this mitzvah versus that mitzvah, but rather they're saying, but Korban Pesach, which represents the foundation of the Jewish identity, that's when we become a nation. That's when we became an Am. We want to be a part of that. We want some of that as well. And says God, that desire was so great, you hear, that desire was so great that he introduced a brand new dimension. That somebody who wants to connect together with the Korban Pesach and is not able to do it for technical reasons on the first Pesach, can bring an offering on the second Pesach instead. Which means it's a mitzvah which evolved only through the desire of these people to have that connection to God. It's the most beautiful idea, it really is. And then here, let's look at verse number 14 and everything can be even a little bit clearer. וכי יגוי אתכם גר, ועשה פסח להשם כחוקת הפסח וכמשפטו כן יעשה, חוקה אחת יהיה לכם ולגר ולאזרח הארץ. And when you've got a convert who's living together with you, he should also make the Pesach offering at the time of Pesach, yeah? Look at Rashi. In the middle of the first column, the most incredible Rashi over here. He says like this. וכי יגוי אתכם גר ועשה פסח, יאכל כל המסגיה יעשה פסח מיד. You would have thought that when a convert converts, the first thing that he should do after his conversion is he should bring a Korban Pesach. Doesn't matter what time of the year it is. Right? He converts in the middle of the winter. the first thing he should do is bring a korban pesach. Talmud loima chuka achas v'goyme. That what? No, he's got to bring pesach at the same time as everybody else. Why? Why would I imagine that a convert has to bring his korban pesach straight away? Why would I imagine anything except for what it says in the Torah that it should come at Nisan in spring? We don't see anywhere else, for example, that a convert converts and the first thing he should do is to commemorate Yom Kippur, or to keep he converts on a Tuesday and on Wednesday he has to keep Shabbos. We don't see that anywhere.
So this is the only thing. The Korban Pesach is the only mitzvah that you have to do that doesn't have a set calendar.
No, quite the opposite. Here, Rashi is saying quite the opposite. Rashi is saying that when a convert converts, that he can only bring his Korban Pesach on Pesach. And he shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that he can bring his Korban Pesach immediately after he converts. What's Pshat? How do we understand this? Because of what we said just before. Korban Pesach represents our connection to the Jewish nation as a Jewish nation. Which means that if a convert wants to bring an individual offering after he converts, of course he can do that. But to bring an offering which represents the Jewish nation, so you might have thought that the convert, when he converts, he's now become a member of the Jewish nation. And if he become a member of the Jewish nation, what should he do now? He should bring his Korban Pesach now, regardless of what time of the year it is. And yet the Torah is saying no. That the time of the Pesach offering is something which is absolutely etched into it. It cannot be moved. It's only on the 15th of Nisan. And in these very extreme conditions, on the 14th of Iyar as well, for a very few amount of people, right?
Including the ger.
Including the ger. A ger should not bring his korban on the 14th of Iyar. If the ger converts immediately after Pesach, he should wait the whole year. He should wait and bring his korban Pesach together with everybody else. Because being part of the Jewish nation means adapting yourself according to the Jewish nation and having to do what God wants the Jewish nation to do.
No exception.
No exceptions. If these people would not have come, the mitzvah of Pesach Sheni would never have come into existence. The only mitzvah...
It doesn't exist anyways.
Yes, it does.
Oh, it does still exist? Pesach?
Yeah. So what do we do now in Pesach Sheni? There isn't anything to do, right? So we don't say Tachnun, which is the prayer that's recited on a regular day.
You don't have to eat matzah.
And you can, if you want, you can eat a bit of matzah, or you cannot eat a bit of matzah, whatever you want. But there's nothing. We don't do anything.
Accustomed to eat matzah.
Lots of people eat matzah, yeah.
And it's a suda.
But it's not a chiyuv. There's no obligation to do it. But Yehipchas most incredible. It's the only mitzvah we've got like that. Which is all the other mitzvahs have been given to us by God, and they were going to be given to us by God, come what may. And it could be that maybe there was some kind of a catalyst which meant that it was given now instead of being given at a different time. That's a possibility. But the idea of introducing a brand new mitzvah that would not have existed without the desire of these people to be connected to Korban Pesach, that we don't have anywhere else.
But also, what gets to me here is that when you look for a little bit of leniency, fine, you'll get your leniency. But it works the other way.
Yeah,
around.
for sure. Which means that it's like this: Zeh lumat zeh salukim, right? There's an absolute balance over here, and you're right. You want to have a little bit. You want some flexibility. So if you're going to become flexible in that direction, there's going to be flexibility in the other direction as well. Maybe it's not always a good thing. And how's that for a paradox? Maybe flexibility is not always the best thing to have. Maybe sometimes the best thing that we can have is inflexibility, to remain within a very narrow bandwidth and do what we're supposed to do and live with those consequences, rather than have a much wider bandwidth which allows us to grow in one direction tremendously and also to sink in the other direction tremendously as well. I don't know. I'm not telling you what's better or what's worse. I'm just those are the repercussions.
Students in some colleges, will do an exam and they'll get whatever grade, and then if they come and they complain that the grade is too low, there's a policy in a lot of places saying, okay, you can complain. It goes to a VAD committee. Now, beware, student. They can decide that you deserve another few grades, but they can also have a re-look at it and decide that you actually deserve even less.
Very good.
So
Yeah, which I think makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Which means it can't only be in one direction. It just can't. You want to have something reevaluated. So for sure, the opportunity, the possibility of running in either direction has to exist. It has to be like that, no? I just want to end with a beautiful idea. A beautiful idea about Shavuot. That Shavuot is one of these festivals which tends to get a little bit overlooked. Pesach is very complicated, very complex, and we spend a lot of time learning about it, and the halachas, and the idea of the Haggadah and everything. And Sukkot, it's pretty complicated too, right? Building the Sukkah, the Arba, meaning the 4 species. A lot of emphasis is placed on these. Shavuot doesn't really have any mitzvahs. It doesn't really have anything going with it. You want to eat cheesecake, you can eat cheesecake, but there's no overwhelming obligation to do so, right? And what happened on Shavuot? So we stay up all night learning Torah, but that's really it. We don't eat matzah, and we don't have Sukkot, and we don't, right? But Shavuot, of course, is the pinnacle of everything, because that's when the Torah was given to the Jewish people.
Is it one of the Shloshet HaRaglim?
Yeah, for sure. It's the third one. So the idea is like this. The Chatam Sofer, one of the great rabbis from 100 and something years ago in Hungary, says the most incredible idea. He says like this. Chazal say, we read on Shavuot, we read the Megillah of Ruth. A very famous story. Ruth, who was a very, very special lady, and she chose to follow her mother-in-law, even though she had nothing, and she lived in abject poverty, and she came to Israel, and she ends up getting married to somebody called Boaz, and from Boaz, ultimately, King David is born, and the Messianic era, the Messianic dynasty is put into place. It's a very inspiring, very stirring story. However, the Chassam Sofer says like this: the sages say that Rus and Naomi came to Israel on Tet Zayin Nisan, on the 16th of Nisan, the day after the first day of Pesach. Now, there's a halacha that when a person comes in, I don't know, she had to go through conversion or in order to get married, whatever it is, but there had to be a 3-month buffer period where nothing is going to happen. And after 3 months, then she's ready to be able to get married. So explains the Chassam Sofer like this, the most fantastic, the most beautiful idea. He says if you count 3 months from the 16th of Nisan, you get to the 16th of Tammuz. Jewish months, right? Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. On the 16th of Tammuz, Ruth, if you read through the story, she was really supposed to get married. There was supposed to be a levirate marriage, what's called Yibum. She was supposed to be married to somebody who we don't know what his name is. He's called in the Megillah, he's called Ploni Almoni, which means, Joe Blogs, what do you call a body that comes in which nobody knows what the name is?
John Doe. What's his
John Doe, right?
Smith.
Whatever,
Smith, yeah.
John Doe. That's what he's called. She was supposed to get married to him. He was the closest relative, but he didn't want to do it because he was scared there might have been some spiritual repercussions over here, not being sure. She came from Moab. If it was allowed, it wasn't allowed, which means that on the 16th of Tammuz, she was supposed to get married and she didn't. And on the 17th of Tammuz, the next day, she married Boaz. The 17th of Tammuz, which we call Shiva Saba Tammuz, one of the saddest days in the Jewish year, which heralds the breaching of the walls around Jerusalem, and 3 weeks later, it heralded in the destruction of the temple on the 9th of Av. Says the Chassam Sofer, the most incredible idea. On the same day that the walls were being breached, which really was the final, that final moment when it became clear that the destruction was going to take place, on the same day, generations earlier, the Messianic dynasty was being put into place. Boaz and Rus were getting married, and from there, David HaMelech was going to come out, and from David HaMelech, of course, we're talking about the Mashiach, and Emir Hashem, it should be very soon. It's the most incredible idea, it really is, that within the depths of the destruction were already planted the seeds of the redemption. And that's really maybe one of the most important dimensions of what Shavuot is all about. It's true that on Shavuot we don't have all of the tumult of Pesach, and we don't have all of the tumult of Sukkot. On Shavuot, what we have is the calmness of receiving the Torah from God. The inner dimension, right? On Pesach, we turn the house upside down physically. On Sukkot, we leave the house altogether. Everything is physical. We're moving out into nothing. On Shavuot, everything is now going to be internal. It's going to be something from within which, if we approach Shavuot properly, we're going to plant the seeds for our own personal Geula and in Mitzvah Hashem, the redemption of the Jewish nation as well. So everyone should have an uplifting and an inspiring Chag. In Mitzvah Hashem should be a Chag Sameach, Chag Matan Torah. We should all be Zoiche to receive the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we will meet back here in Mitzvah Hashem only next week.